want to spend actually very little time, but just leaving you with one big idea about what resilience means in a company, in the corporate sector. You may, from my bio, think I come from a government service background. I do. But that was a little time ago now. And I spent the last 15 years studying the big picture and trying to understand why things are changing, what is changing, and what those changes mean for particular people in particular places. My company, Gatehouse, is a geopolitical advisory company, but it really is interpreting for a corporate client what lateral risk is coming, or opportunity is coming out of changes in the geopolitical context, and how does what that bit of the macro happening mean for your micro bottom line. And since this is a series about strategy, and since this is a meeting about resilience, I want to connect those two. There's a very fundamental strategy in the mind of the human being. There we are with the only organism that has ever consciously tried to control its own environment. And at the heart of every intelligent human mind, there is a wish to control your own environment. How do we do that? As a medium-sized, not very strong, not very poisonous, not very fast animal. We do it with three principal characteristics. One, obviously, is intelligence. But how you use that intelligence is actually rather important. You have to use it to analyze where you are in your environment. That is the cream of intelligence. The Greeks put it in a succinct, quick phrase, gnothe seoton, know thyself, know who you are in your context. And analyzing that correctly and knowing who you are, who your company is, and what the context is a supreme form of intelligence. The second characteristic, very obviously, if you look where we are on the planet's surface, is adaptability. We can live anywhere where there is oxygen and fresh water. And that adaptability is absolutely vital to survival. But it's a very important characteristic for sustainable life, for longevity, if you like. If you put that into the corporate environment, it means something very specific, which I'll come to when I leave you with the one big idea. The third characteristic is again pretty obvious, but sometimes ignored, because we're not the strongest or the fastest or the most poisonous or the nastiest organism around, and that is teamwork. Each individual is not sufficient on his or her own to continue to survive, to grow in that environment in which we have to be adaptable. It is absolutely essential, through the communication capabilities we have, to have a team around you and to know that that team, whatever team means, is sufficient for your success and for your survival. Now, we're talking about resilience, and Bobby gave us some very interesting facts about the resilience of modern economic societies. But when you say the word resilience, you need to add something. Resilience against what? What are we having to be resilient about? And there are two primary features, not just one. There are two primary features that surround your understanding of resilience. One is a rapidly changing world, resilience against or with change, and the other is competition. Resilience in the face of competition, because that organism is quite a competitive animal and wants to fill the space and control it. And when you have 7 billion organisms with that intelligence living on a planet, they're going to want to control territories that invade other individuals' territories. The principal characteristic of resilience now is in dealing with change and with competition. And lo and behold, I'm not a determinist, but I see from history that there is a historical cycle in human interaction. That when we've had a nasty war, which has happened often enough in our collective history, there is a recovery period after the regret that we've used that violence and got to this result of that violence. There is regret and the beginnings of an understanding that there must be cooperation and compromise to avoid the scourge of war, as the UN puts it. Now, when that cooperation starts working, then human affairs get easier and more successful, and the economy grows, etc. And as the economy grows, more materials are needed, more talent is needed, more greed is expressed, and it gets more competitive. And there has never been a period in history when competition has not ended up in conflict. By definition, because at the end of every peaceful period there is a war. And of course, in this long period of big power peace, there's regional nasty civil wars and things, conflicts going on, people dying, terrorism happening, all the rest of it. Big power conflict is absent from this era, but it has never been absent indefinitely in any previous era, and therefore human beings have to do something unprecedented to avoid big power conflict in the future. And resilience has to take on an element of collective compromise to avoid that fundamental disaster with the weapons we have around us. But what are those reasons for competition? Unfortunately, it comes out principally of a great good that we've experienced in this era, since the Second World War, which is a massive increase in freedom. And freedom gives us all manner of opportunities to do our own things, and as individuals and families and companies and countries to control our own environment. But if that freedom is not accompanied by an understanding of structure, of order, then that freedom is quite dangerous. There has to be a balance between freedom and order for that freedom to be valuable, because perfect freedom for everybody is perfect chaos. And so that has to underline our feelings about resilience. And unreconstructed freedom also has another effect to the atavistic instincts in a human being, that it creates not a warm, general, collective feeling of planetary harmony, but a freedom to regress to the natural default instinct of a human being, which is tribal. So too much freedom breaks societies down into smaller units. It doesn't unite them into larger ones. And we see huge instances of that happening in the things that are happening around us in this country, across the Atlantic, and elsewhere around the world. At a time when institutions are becoming less effective because they don't reform as quickly as society changes, so just as society gets more adaptable, changeable, more interested in control, more identity conscious, living in smaller units, institutional government is not solving our problems as we want them solved. Now, what do companies do in an environment that I've described of that nature? There are 2 or 3 things that are absolutely essential if you're thinking about resilience. One of them, of course, is diversification. I'm talking about strategies. I'm not talking about hiring good people or having a great boss and all that. I'm talking about strategies of diversification, because that's a strategy for adaptability. You're talking about the spread of risk, that you analyze with your intelligence the full spread of risk, not just the linear risk that you get from people and finance and physical security and computer, etc., breaking down, not just that risk spectrum, which is present in everybody's risk committee in their companies, but the lateral risks coming out of the environment which you can't control, changing around you. That environment is analyzable for the changes that are most likely to affect your bottom line. You don't have to worry about everything out there. Change is frightening, but you do not have to worry about everything. But you have to decide as a company, as a collective, as an organization, which are the things out there that you're making assumptions about, that you rely on not changing for your supply chain, your business chain to work. Which of those are most likely not to be inviolable or unchanging into the future, and what do you do about them in contingency planning? That's where you should focus your contingency planning. But the one idea I want to leave with you is that there is a dilemma about resilience. Because an efficient company in today's world, against the competition that we're experiencing, is a company that has the most effective mechanisms for supply of raw materials, for manufacturing or whatever they manufacture or create, whether ideas or products, of the delivery and of the financial return. The just-in-time mechanism is extremely important for a company's profit effectiveness. Resilience, on the other hand, means having contingencies, having diversification, having adaptability, understanding what's happening out there. A perfectly resilient company is not necessarily a perfectly profitable company this week, this month, this year. So there is a tension between resilience and profitability. By our just-in-time, highly mechanical, highly intelligent, this is perhaps where artificial intelligence comes in to make you more effective, company structure that is looking for profit in your environment. The idea that you need to take away from this discussion is that every company has to be clear throughout its workforce, certainly throughout its management, on where on the spectrum you wish to be placed between perfect resilience and perfect profit next month. There has to be a mean between those two things, because if you're too focused on the one, you're likely to lose the other. You need to give that some thought. Thank you.